Christ Center presents Let's Talk About Love, a program focusing on romantic and family relationships. Our church is located at 1615 West Shelton Avenue in the heart of West Oak Lane in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19126. Our phone number, 215-LIVRITE, Live Right. Our teacher is pastor and counselor and 8-time author, Dr. David R.L. Stevens. This is a listener-supported program. All donations should be made out to Christ Center Church of God and Mark Radio. And now, here is our teacher, Dr. Stevens.
Good morning. I'm Dr. David Stevens. Glad to be with you again. And the name of this program, as you've been told, is Let's Talk About Love. So I want to go back a little bit. Last week we were talking about the principle of saying it, and I want to start there again this week. This is a very strong principle, but its strength may be underestimated by the uninformed. I believe just like we can speak positive things into existence, we can speak negative things into existence if we're not cautious. Johnny and Amanda got used to saying all kinds of negative things to each other, about each other. And Johnny complained that Amanda was a terrible cook and did not have any possibilities of ever getting any better. We have all heard of self-fulfilling prophecies, so she adopted this as truth, and she made no efforts at doing any better. Then she, in turn, charged her husband Johnny with being all thumbs when it came to the simplest of house repairs. Johnny never, ever even tried to fix one thing in their house. This caused them to have to pay a handyman to come in for almost everything. He did not cut grass, paint, shovel snow, or even change car tires. It seemed that even changing light bulbs presented a challenge for him because he was convinced by Amanda that he could not do these things. Because he convinced Amanda that cooking was just plainly out of reach for her. They ate out very often, and TV warm-ups were her specialty. Just look at the money they wasted because they managed to talk away each other's confidence. Not being satisfied to criticize and harass each other face to face, they also berated each other to their children. This, of course, helped to implant the same kind of negative junk into the minds of their children. In fact, if they had really paid some attention to the two children, they would have noticed that they were learning to be negative as well. Their children had begun severely criticizing and condemning each other. I really liked the way Tara and Donald started their marriage off. They were so encouraging to each other. Each told the other how wonderful they felt about the things the other person had done. When Donald told Tara about the splendid meals she prepared, it encouraged her on the next effort. When Tara thanked Donald for his thoughtfulness, it just inspired him to do it more. Now this is, to some, it might seem a little sophomoric and relegated only to newlyweds, but I've watched them for over 15 years. They continue to follow the same pattern. Perhaps if some of these skeptics who have been married for a while would adopt some of this freshness in their marriage relationship, it would add some spice to their relationships. To this day, I continue to thank my wife for each meal she places before me. She in turn continues to thank me for every dinner we eat out. We try not to take each other for granted. Our positive words continue to spur our positive actions. When growing up, my family always taught me to say positive things, and it has worked for me throughout life. Because of that nurturing, I've always taught our children to say positive things. Hopefully, this pattern will continue in the Stevens ancestral line. With this principle in mind, I always try to caution couples about speaking negatively about their marriage. It will only cause you to see and focus on the more unpleasant aspects. I usually refer to Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, that urges us to focus on that which is good. We can actually add in Proverbs 17:22 that says, "A merry heart does good like a medicine." Saying that which is good makes for a merry heart. While I am at it, let me say a word about setting the tone of one's environment. Don't hang around with negative people. The result of hanging out with negative people is not going to reverse itself into positive energy. Remember, negative people give off a lot of negative energy. Don't allow yourself to get swept away into their negative vacuum. You got to do better. In order to do better, you got to be better. Okay, now I want to move on to another subject, old school, new school. Recently, I had a couple who had been attending pre-marriage counseling sessions with me, and we had a couple of sessions, and I felt that they were very productive meetings. They seemed to be learning some things and were not afraid to ask questions. In fact, they asked plenty of questions. Because my counseling schedule was very heavy at that time, a few weeks went by before I missed them. I checked on them and was told by the person who had recommended them that they felt that some of my advice was old school. I've always tried to use cutting-edge examples and illustrations in my presentations, and I'm usually pretty well up with my statistics. So I was kind of taken aback by the comment. I always try to turn up, as they say. I couldn't help wondering, what in the world did I do wrong with this couple? I think every counselor reviews their materials and counseling approach as they go along, which is very healthy, but this was a little strange to me. Then it hit me. I don't think it was even about me or my methods of presentation. I think that it surely was about the historic tradition, the biblical tradition they were having problems with. The principles that the Bible talked about. That's where the problem was. Perhaps they were leaning more toward hearing new stuff that is more comfortable and fitting with today's lifestyle. Now, these people were Christians, and one would just assume that Christians are pretty comfortable with Christian standards. However, just in saying that, I realize that much of today's Christian standards, as practiced by some, oppose traditional standards by far. One cannot assume that by hearing one of the postmodern era Christians claiming to be a Christian, that their meaning is the same as the historical traditional meaning that some of us traditionalists refer to as being born again. Many of today's postmodern Christians have come to faith by what is called a moment of enlightenment, or what some are calling an epiphany moment. According to Webster's New World Dictionary, A, a moment of sudden intuitive understanding, a flash of insight, and B, a scene or an experience, etc., that occasions such a moment. An epiphany is all right if it is accompanied with a spiritual Jesus blood transfusion and a serious commitment, etc. Even the act of baptism symbolizes the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And the fact that one complies is a testimony of their own death to sin, buried by that blood, and a commitment to a new life in accordance with the will of Christ and the word of Christ. Perhaps I've gotten a little theological here, but I think that sometimes we have to set the groundwork for further understanding and discussion. If the word says that we are to live in a certain manner, how then can we call for a new word that more aptly suits our lifestyle? If they clash, it can't be the word. It must be the lifestyle that is out of kilter. Okay, back to my point. My job when it comes to truth is not to try to make folks comfortable. Truth is truth. Try and water it down in order to accomplish acceptance is to neutralize that truth. Let's look at this principle as an example. A man as a husband is identified by Bible standards as the major family provider / administrator. This is not painted there by accident. Adam, the first human, was chosen to bear a heavy responsibility. He typifies the male role. This was planned from the beginning. It does not make him the brightest knife in the drawer or the family know-it-all. What God is saying in the Genesis 3:8 through 24 account is that the male should have the responsibility to give knowledgeable answers back to God for the welfare of his family. The man is not the boss of the operation, but as a responsible manager must be able to give a reasonable account of answers about his family condition. If I had a department store and I left a manager in charge, I should be able to come back and ask that manager about the day-to-day operations of that store. He should not tell me he does not know what is going on in the shoe department because he has not been there lately, and also that he is not good at selling shoes anyway. If he is the manager, he must manage. That's his job. Responsibility is always a little scary. Sometimes an answer or a direction must be supplied with a shaky confidence. If I, the decision maker, get it right, we move on. If we get it wrong, we have to either start over, salvage what we have, or find a completely new direction to operate on. Remember, God is always faithful. I remember as a child hearing a poem about a difference in men and women facing their future. The poem described women walking out of their front door and pausing before taking the steps. According to that poem, they look both ways with uncertainty and then with much hesitation before going down those steps. But men, it suggested, walk out with complete impunity, not caring to even bother to fear what lay to their left or right. Then, according to this poem, they plunge courageously ahead. Well, that's not true. We may as men take a bold step or two on the outside, but bold may truly be an outside view only. I confess to praying for the right answer, and then praying again that I heard the right answer. A cocky, assured male is probably not a careful, wise, praying leader. Life is scary enough when you are a single entity, but when you have to speak for a whole family, man, that is heavy stuff. Teddy was smug, cocky, and ineffective. He liked to detach himself from leading his family because his wife was so good at leadership. Although she begged him to help her, he continued to bail on her. He could never be counted on to help make a real decision. He became more and more selfish and aloof. These non-actions were burning his wife out. She could never count on his help or input. She was just managing to keep the lid on the family of 5, but it took every ounce of courage and energy she had. If God went calling on their house, asking what was up, Teddy would have to answer, I don't know. You'll have to ask Diane. Diane certainly should have assisted her husband as a partner, but should not have had to be the major decision maker, implementer, and enforcer. Well, my time is up. I've got to say goodbye. This is Dr. David Stevens looking for your response. Try us at ccenter22cog@gmail.com.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Let's Talk About Love. This program has been presented by Christ Center Church of God, 1615-19 West Shelton Avenue in the heart of the West Oak Lake section of Philadelphia. Our speaker has been Dr. David Stevens, pastor, counselor, and award-winning author. This radio program is listener-sponsored, and we do solicit your prayers and donations. See you next time on Let's Talk About Love.